Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakaptarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, very good. So last night we read the first 5 verses of Bhagavad Gita. The first 3 establishing again the value of hearing about Krishna, so important. Then the second verse, quite a famous verse, how this knowledge is the king of education. First verse also was explaining how we must not be envious of Krishna or anyone, actually, particularly any devotees or Krishna. It was through Arjuna, being a non-envious devotee, that Lord Krishna decided to speak the Bhagavad Gita to him. Anyway, then there's verse 2, how it's the king of knowledge, superior in different ways. Then verse 3, a sort of quite strong verse, you might say. Be careful, be very careful. Don't take it lightly. Don't take Krishna consciousness lightly. Have faith, develop faith in Krishna, in the process, in the devotees. Have faith like that. And then you'll make nice progress. You'll make very good progress. If you have faith and determination based on that very faithful acceptance of Krishna in my life. But unfortunately, if you don't have faith, well, then sooner or later, it's very likely at least you'll fall away from Krishna consciousness. Then verses 4 and 5, they were talking about the achintya abade nature of Krishna. How he is, but he isn't at the same time, particularly in regard to things within this material world. Let me just read 4 and 5 again. Yes. Verse 4. By me and my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And then verse 5. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the very source of creation. So he finished up there. It appears there's some contradictions, but there's not really. To whatever degree it may seem that there are, it's just Krishna's mystical potency. But otherwise, he's here and not here. The living entities are in him. As he says, all beings are in me. But then again, everything does not rest in me. This is Achintya Bheda Tattva philosophy. And last night just to clarify a little, we gave the example of the lights in this room, right here in this temple room. The light fittings are on the ceiling. They're several meters, some meters up above us. But the light which they're producing is right down here. It's right down here. Even we've got ourselves a slightly fancy little light for videoing. And that light is over there on top of the camera. It's, I don't know, about 2 or 3 meters away or something, the actual gizmo. But the light from it is right here on me, and so I look brighter than I usually do. So it's one and different. Yes, the light fitting is there. It's producing everything. But the light from it, its energy is over here. It's on me. So yes, it's that's the way it is. So we carry on then from verse 6, which we'll read in a moment, until verse 10. Lord Krishna explains basically how the material world is working in this obeyed way, that Krishna is not involved, but in certain respects, particularly through his energies, but in certain respects, he is controlling this world. He isn't, and he is at the same time. And so what is the relationship? It's a little extraordinary. So we will, right now, let us read all these 5 verses, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, just to give you a little overall picture of what's being discussed in this regard, and then we'll do a bit of an elaboration as always. So verse 6, understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings rest in me. Just remember that. Anyway, we'll come back in a couple of minutes. 7, O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create again. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again. And under my will, it is annihilated again. It is annihilated at the end. And verse 9, O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. I hope you caught that. As though neutral. And 10, the last verse in this section. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Okay, so let's go back to verse 6 and we'll analyze that a little. Understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings rest in me. So just as the wind is in the sky, all created beings rest in Krishna. Yes. So, but now, how? What is this resting in Krishna? What does it look like? What is it made up of? How does it work? What is it? Well, the example given in the verse is just such a wonderful example. Lord Krishna gives the example of the wind resting in the sky. It's there. We go out every day. The wind is there. 5,000 years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, then Arjuna complained that my mind is like the wind, uncontrollable, just going here and there. So 5,000 years ago, the wind was in the sky and it's still there. So what is the idea here? Well, this is the idea. This is the idea. Please listen to this. That when Lord Krishna talks about the sky, what he's really referring to, is space. Space. Yes. It's here in the Sanskrit, if you look at the Sanskrit, it says that the wind is akash stita. Akash, the sky, or like the unmanifest. So yeah, or we can say space. Space. You know, you cannot see space. You cannot feel it. You cannot hear space. You can see things which are situated in space, like this planet is situated in space. You can hear things which are situated in space. You can feel the wind, mentioned here, which is moving back and forth and around and all over within space. But all these things have no effect whatsoever on the space. The space is just the space within which they're moving, and there is no contact even between the wind and the space it's moving in. When we move, we walk around. We're walking through space. We feel the movement of the air, but you don't feel the space, because space is that part of matter which cannot be seen, cannot be touched, cannot be tasted, cannot be smelt. All these sensory functions cannot function on space, because it's you can't touch it, it's intangible. It's simply the space. And various tangible things are moving in it, but it remains just the space. So similarly, Krishna is maintaining, supporting, holding, giving shelter to everything. But things are not actually touching him, making any contact with him. There's no interaction between Krishna and the conditioned souls directly, just as there's no interaction between the space and the wind. So it's a very nice example. I really like that example. So the wind has no effect on the sky, on the space, on space, because space, there's no attachment. The space has no attachment for the wind. Similarly, because Krishna has no attachment for the conditioned souls, they have no effect on him. Anyway, in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada explains. Let's just have a look here. Srila Prabhupada explains. This is basically the first paragraph of the purport. Please listen. For the ordinary person, it's almost inconceivable how the huge material creation is resting in him, Krishna. But the Lord is giving an example that may help us to understand. The sky may be the biggest manifestation we can conceive. And in that sky, the wind or air is the biggest manifestation in the cosmic world. The movement of the air influences the movement of everything. But although the wind is great, it is still situated within the sky. The wind is not beyond the sky. Similarly, all the wonderful cosmic manifestations are existing by the supreme will of God, and all of them are subordinate to that supreme will. As we generally say, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus everything is moving under his will. By his will everything is being created, everything is being maintained, and everything is being annihilated. Still he is aloof from everything, as the sky is always aloof from the activities of the wind. Okay. So I hope you get the idea. It is, of course, somewhat achintya. There's an element of inconceivability involved. But if you consider these things, you will get an idea of what the Lord is talking about, and it's very important. So verse 7, O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. So, if we just have a brief look, let's have a brief look at the purport. Srila Prabhupada again examines, not in as much detail as before, but he examines the subject of time within the universe, time particularly in relation to Lord Brahma. Let me just read what he says there. At the end of the millennium means at the death of Brahma. Brahma lives for 100 years, and his one day is calculated at 4,300,000,000 of our earthly years. His night is of the same duration. His month consists of 30 such days and nights, and his year of 12 months. After 100 such years, when Brahma dies, the devastation or annihilation takes place. This means that the energy manifested by the Supreme Lord is again wound up in himself. Okay, so basically the Lord is just sort of revisiting that type of idea. Those ideas. The creation, the destruction, and then the creation. Verse 8. Verse 8. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under my will, it is annihilated at the end. So, the question may arise, it definitely will, at least in some people's minds. If Krishna is not involved, then what does it mean he's creating and destroying? As he says here, that all material manifestations enter into my nature, and then in the beginning of the next millennium, by my potency, I create again. So, this is the answer. By his potency, by his energy, generally speaking, just by that, without Krishna having to get hands-on and physically hold on to and manipulate and all that sort of thing. Everything is going on by his potency. And because it's his potency, he knows what's going on. It's not that his potency is working and Krishna at some point thinks, gee whiz, what happened? How did this happen? No. It's his potency. So he knows what's going on with his potency. So Srila Prabhupada, having in the previous verse, as we said, again, because the subject is the creation and the destruction. So in the previous verse, 7, Lord Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna, you could say, is talking about the very early stages, final stages of destruction, earlier stages of creation, some detailed information about Lord Brahma and how he works is given. So now in this purport here, verse 8, Srila Prabhupada takes the subject further. At least elaborates in different ways. That there are the Purusha avatars, and he explains their roles in the creation. Then about the different species, that of course that's where Lord Brahma comes in, manifesting all the different species, either directly himself or some of his immediate first generation children, they produce some of the species. But this is going on, and Prabhupada says here, just at the end of the purport, the state of being in their past life and the past creation is simply manifested again. That's us, when we get placed in a universe again. So whatever was our state in our previous life before the previous destruction, however we were then, we simply manifest in that state again. And all this is done simply by his will, Krishna's will. This is the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And after creating different species of life, he has no connection with them. The creation takes place to accommodate the inclinations of the various living entities, and so the Lord does not become involved with it. So, again, still, someone might wonder how these things really going on. And verse 8 takes it a step further. Here's an interesting little sort of side point. In between 7, which we just read, and 8, which we're just about to read, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Arjuna asks, but how can you create if you're detached and you're unchangeable by nature? Yeah, as 4 and 5 say basically. So 8 answers. In 8, Lord Krishna gives the answer. And here it is. The whole cosmic order is under me. But under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again. And under my will, it is annihilated at the end. So, yes, so the living entities get their bodies by the arrangements of Lord Brahma, particularly, and those a few people, not a huge number, but some number, who are empowered by him and manifested by him. But what role, what's the involvement of the Lord? It's all going on by his will. Just by his will. Not exactly here, but elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Krishna's will is fact. Krishna just has to will something, think of it, and it's there. We may think of so many things, and some of those things we want to happen, to manifest as realities, not just thoughts within our minds. So some of them we then try to put into effect by our will, manifest our will to bring whatever it is into existence. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. And even when we can, oftentimes it's not easy. But Krishna, he just wills, let it be, and it is. Actually, Srila Prabhupada made the point, where was it? Oops, where are we? Srila Prabhupada made the point about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was in the purport of verse 7 that right at the end of the purport, when there's a need to manifest the cosmic world, it is done by his will. Bahusyam. Well, the full thing is Eko Bahusyam, actually. Although I am one, I will become many. That's his will. And there you go. There they are. So many are manifesting from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All right. So there we were in verse 8. It's all going on by the will of the Lord. And the last sentence we read, the creation takes place to accommodate the inclinations of the various living entities, and so the Lord doesn't become involved with it. It's subtle. There is some subtlety there, but if we consider these things, we'll get a reasonably clear idea. And verse 9, O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I'm ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. So again, a question could arise. How can all this go on without Krishna becoming implicated, caught up, entangled? Yeah, having like, you could say, having like some real solid responsibility, like a foreman or a full-on manager. But Krishna answers by saying that he is the Sanskrit term. The Sanskrit term is Udasin Vat. Udasin Vat, it's in the third line of the verse of the Sanskrit. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. As though neutral, yes. Vat, in this context, vat means like, as if, like that. So he's always neutral, although, as Prabhupada says in the purport, he has his hand in every sphere of activity. It's not like it's beyond his control. No, he's seated, he's neutral, he is as if neutral. And in the purport, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says here that the Lord is always neutral in the material activities of the created world. This neutrality is mentioned here with the word udasin vat. Although he has control over every minute detail of material activities, he is sitting as if neutral. And then Srila Prabhupada gives a very specific example to illustrate, at least give an idea how it's working. The example can be given of a high court judge sitting on his bench. By his order, by his will, so many things are happening. Someone is being hanged. Someone is being put into jail. Someone is being awarded a large amount of money. But still he's neutral. He's not personally, emotionally involved, caught up in it. At least in the case of the judge, of course it's not exactly the same as in the case of Krishna himself. I mean, but there's some nice similarities. In the case of the judge, there are laws. And when he finds that someone is guilty of some crime, he just looks in the law book. Okay, there you go. The person is sentenced. So, in the case of Krishna with the living entities, all that happens is they get their karma. Krishna doesn't have to sit and worry what should be done, what would be right, what would not. The laws of karma are already there, and he just lets them function. He doesn't even involve himself, although he's completely aware. He is so much in a position to control. He is within every atom. So if he really wants to, he can control on an atomic level. Right, so as though neutral, though udasin vat indicates that as though neutral, he is not just totally neutral, like don't care. It all goes on, he's just totally divorced, and he's got nothing to do with it. That's not the case. That's not the case. All right, and then verse 10 is another fairly well-known verse, actually, nice verse. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So again, examining the same point from different angles, here Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, it's clearly stated here that the Supreme Lord, although aloof from all the activities of the material world, remains the Supreme Director. Of course he does. The Supreme Lord is the supreme will and the background of this material manifestation. But the management is being conducted by material nature, means by his energies, and for that matter, by his representatives, the demigods. Everything is going on in very organized ways. It is highly organized, even down to minute details. But that's all going on by the energies and by his representatives who are manipulating, controlling the energies, but he is the final sort of arbiter, the final decision maker. Yes, actually, let me just go back to verse 9. There's a special question there for those of you who are doing Bhakti Shastri. So verse 9, I'll just read it again. O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I'm ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. Wow, that's a different... Oh no, okay, it's the same translation. So we have a special purport here, which is examining the same point. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:7-13. Purport 3:7-13. Since the entire material existence is meant for sense gratification, the senses are the medium of material activities, and they cause the quivering of the steady soul. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such material activities. So the question is, referring to a purport, this one we just read right now, that was mentioned in the class pertaining to material activities. So since the entire what is meant for sense gratification, the senses are the medium of material activities, and they cause the quivering of the what. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such what. So there are three whats. What are they? The correct example is material existence. Since the entire material existence is meant for sense gratification, then the senses cause the quivering of the steady soul. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such what? material activities. Okay. And back to 10, sorry about that. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So, again, we can refer back to the Sanskrit to just bring up an interesting point, that in the Sanskrit, the term is mayadhyakshena. This Prabhupada translates under my direction, mayadhyakshena. Now, literally, aksha means eyes. Aksha. Krishna is Kamalaksha, lotus-eyed, Kamalaksha. So when Krishna is saying it's working under my direction, he is saying it's working right under my eyes. Yeah. In this way, he remains the supreme director. And, you know, we've come across, I think, twice already, as we've been going through Bhagavad Gita, I think it's twice if I remember correctly, not mentioned right here, but mentioned in a couple of other places, how Maharaj Ambarish was working as king. That Maharaj Ambarish, he was such a great devotee. He didn't want to get into the details of the management and how is the kingdom running and the different departments, how are they working. You know, he had people doing that. So what was he doing? He was just engaged in puja. He was in his temple room, worshipping the deity, having kirtan, reading shastra, doing different devotional services for the deity. That's what he was doing. But the kingdom was going on perfectly because his energy, so to speak, his energy, all his representatives, they were doing their duties because they were so dedicated to him, because he cared for them so much. They were so dedicated to him. So they were doing everything perfectly while he was doing puja and kirtan, etc. So simply by his presence, everything was going on. And Srila Prabhupada explains in, where is it now? It's in the purport. It's about, what would you say? It is where it begins. Oops. Because he glances. Because he glances. My gosh. Okay, anyway, here we go. Because he glances over material nature, there's undoubtedly activity on the part of the Supreme Lord. Well, there you go, devotees. Prabhupada has admitted it eventually. Because he glances over material nature, there is undoubtedly activity on the part of the Supreme Lord. But he has nothing to do with the manifestation of the material world directly. This example is given in the Smriti. It's part of the Vedic literatures. Bhagavad Gita is part of the Smriti and Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's a big body of literatures. So somewhere else in those literatures, the following example is given. When there's a fragrant flower before someone, the fragrance is touched by the smelling power of the person. Yet the smelling and the flower are detached from one another. There is a similar connection between the material world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, he has nothing to do with this material world, but he creates by his glance and ordains. In summary, material nature, without the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, cannot do anything. Yet the Supreme Personality is detached from all material activities. Now, isn't that an interesting example which Prabhupada gave? A fragrant flower. The fragrance and the smelling of it by the person who's doing the smelling. The flower's in one place and the fragrance is a little away, and the person who's smelling is a little away. He's not in the flower. Just like here, sometimes we grow a special type of jasmine. It's called night blooming. Night blooming. Some call it night queen. During the day, the flowers, many little flowers, they close up. But when darkness comes, they open. And the fragrance. Oh, Krishna. You can smell them strongly from 10, maybe 20 meters away. Between 10 and 20 meters away. Oh, this overpowering smell. But the actual flower, which possesses the smell, the fragrance, is a good number of meters away. So, that's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? So, the fragrant flowers in front of someone, and the fragrance is touched, so to speak, by your smelling capacity. The fragrance is touched by the smelling power of the person. Yet the smelling and the flower are detached from one another. So, okay, those are some thoughts on this. So after hearing all of this, sure, it's amazing, isn't it? How Krishna's working and not working, and controlling and not controlling. How powerful his will is. How powerful his energies are. And he's enjoying in Goloka Vrindavan. Everything else is going on perfectly. So seeing Krishna so wonderful, why doesn't everyone just surrender to him? Well, the next section from verse 11 to verse 15 is called non-worshippers and worshippers. And particularly in the next two verses, 11 and 12. In verses 11 and 12, we will hear descriptions of the non-worshippers. And then 13 and 14 describes the worshippers, or actually the elevated pure devotees. And verse 15 describes three other types of people who worship the Supreme, but in different ways. It's all a bit, it's definitely not the same as devotional service at all. But they do something. So let us then read, we still have a few minutes, let us read verses 11 and 12. And probably tomorrow we'll go on and elaborate about them more, but let's begin our study of verses 11 and 12. So verse 11, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. That's a famous verse. And verse 12, those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Well, that's just something we can mention to start off. We'll go into it in more depth tomorrow night. But Lord Krishna is saying that, basically what he's saying is that if we do not accept his form, his human-like form, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if we don't accept Krishna as he appears amongst us, as he is, in his transcendental body, with his transcendental consciousness, his transcendental qualities, his transcendental pastimes, if someone rejects that transcendental nature of the body, the form of Krishna, then, among other things, the effect that has is that the person finds themselves just sort of gravitating towards demonic and atheistic views. They are connected. Your attitude towards Krishna, and particularly in this context, the form, the body of Krishna, his transcendental qualities, his transcendental pastimes, if someone rejects those, then it causes the arisal of an attraction to demonic and atheistic views. Yes. So, anyway, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Let me just conclude by reading some sentences from Srila Prabhupada taken from a class on verse 11. Mudha, rascals, to accept God as man and to accept man as God, this is rascaldom. We can understand who is an intelligent man and who is a rascal by this criterion. In another place, Krishna says, Naman duskridano mudha prapadyante naradama. Mudha, rascals, they do not surrender unto me. Krishna is canvassing, but the mudhas will not accept it. Well, in case you're not familiar with the term, mudha means fools, fools and rascals. Avajananti mam mudha. They think, why should I accept Krishna? I have made my own God. So we have a very clear criterion to understand a rascal and an intelligent man. If he's a devotee of Krishna, then he's an intelligent man. If he is not, then he's a rascal. No, he does not accept Krishna as God, but he has many other gods. Especially in our Hindu society, the Mayavad philosophers say that everyone is God. How everyone can be God? If everyone is God, then what is the significance of God? Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada. So there we go, devotees. We'll see you tomorrow evening. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.